So everybody, thank you for coming. And I want to bring Michael Waters up here, who organized this for us because I'm pretty far away, literally. But very exciting to, Michael, come on. And this is a great venue. We don't know where we can fit in. The point is that poetry matters much more now than anybody could imagine. The world's on fire, and we need truth. And poets are seeking it and sharing it. And I'm just delighted that we could have this venue in New York City, which is the center of publishing in our country. And we have tonight 5 wonderful poets. One of the poets, who's going to be number 6, was unable to come because of health reasons in her family that just came up. And so all 5 are going to be up here. I'm going to introduce Michael very briefly from his bio, and then Michael is going to introduce all the other poets so that we have a more continuous flow. So Michael Waters' recent books include Cinnamon, Etruscan Press, 2023, CAR, Boa Editions, 2020, The Dean of Discipline, University of Pittsburgh Press, 2018, and the co-edit anthology Borderlines, Poets of Migration, Knopf, 2020. Darling Vulgarity, Boa Editions, 2006, was a finalist for the Los Angeles Times Book Prize, a 2017 Guggenheim Fellow. He's a recipient of 5 Pushcart Prizes, an NEA, Fulbright, and a New Jersey State Council on the Arts Fellowship. He lives without a cell phone in New Jersey. He's very proud of it, but he is connected to the police, and so therefore they do not, he doesn't need a cell phone. And so thank you all for coming. And Michael, I'm turning it over to you. And thank you all for being here and supporting poetry in our country.
Thank you, Ron. Yeah, so Ron called me really out of nowhere and said, can we do something to sort of give Alaska Quarterly Review more of a presence on the East Coast? And I said, I don't know, you want to do a reading or something? And he said, yeah, go ahead and set it up. But I got in touch with a number of people, all of whom responded very positively. But Jason Schneiderman got back and said, hey, we can do KGB one night. I had read here before. I thought, wow, what could be better than that? So thank you, Jason, who's not here tonight. And I want to mention Alicia Ostreicher will not be here this evening, and I'm really sorry for that. She's sorry for it. Her husband, and she wouldn't mind me telling you this, but her husband is in the hospital right now, and so she flew out to AWP in Seattle on Thursday. She flew back home because her husband went into the hospital on Friday, so she came back right away then, and she's probably over there with him right now. I want to say something about him quickly. His name is Jerry Ostreicher, and pretty much everything that we know about dark matter and black holes is due to him. He's a world-famous astrophysicist. He's 86 years old now, and in fact, one of the what they call minor planets that they find in other systems, one of them is named after him. And so anyway, we're thinking about Alicia tonight certainly, and wish she could be here as she wishes she could be here. So I'll keep the introductions very short. I handed out sheets so you can read about the folks who are going to be reading tonight. Astonishing poets. When Ron said, let's do this, he said, oh, I'd really like to have Jessica Greenbaum and Laura Colby. And I'm not making this up, this is true. Both of their books were right next to me. And I thought, wow. And I had never met either one of them. So this is really exciting for me then. Mihaila Maskaluk is my wife. And I thought, wow, that's great. That makes things easy, certainly. Carrie Salerno is a former student of mine and a very dear, close friend. And so all of this fell together so easily and so quickly. And so I think it's going to be a terrific evening. I won't say much about you have these things. I just want to say Jessica is so modest, and she didn't mention any of her books. Her recent book, The Two Yvonnes, was published by Princeton University Press, and her recent book is Spilled and Gone from the University of Pittsburgh Press. So please welcome Jessica Greenbaum.
Oh, it has been a long time since I've been at a mic. So fun. Thanks, everybody, for being here. KGB Bar, thanks for this storied place where I've heard so many of my friends' wonderful poems. Ron, thank you so much for inviting us all and making this happen, and Michael for putting it in motion and making it so friendly. Really appreciate that. So I thought I would read 2 short poems by Alicia. So sorry she can't be here. These are both poems from the journal Tikkun, and the first is called Prayer. The force that sends light through the cracks in everything needs eyes to see. May it find me. May it find my eyes, enlighten my mind, gladden my days. May the one writing in the book of life keep writing my name clearly, and may I finally learn to read it. How's this with the mic and the talking? Yeah, okay, thank you. Needed that. They used to say, the pot must not complain about the potter, but I disagree. And I say, you there, writing in the book of life, send me your contact information. I know I am only one of your minor compositions. Still, I'd like to write you back, tell you my thoughts. Alicia Ostreicher. So Ron's very kindly is publishing 2 poems in a recent issue and a future issue. This one is also the title poem of a working manuscript called Each Other Moment. We turned location back on. We were resetting our passwords. We were scanning the QR code to order an iced matcha latte. We were on hold. We were saying representative into the phone. We were showing our Excelsior pass and putting in our contact information for timed tickets to the gardens. We were signing up for a streaming service and decrying our Zoom appearance. We were skimming, not reading. We were trawling and scrolling. We were calculating the millennia before reefs could revive and species come back in colors we haven't imagined. We were guilty, and each other moment also innocent. We were meditating so that the unforgiving might give a little. We were trying to find the contact information for the company. We were wondering where to recycle foam rubber. We were listening to a podcast and downloading a playlist. We cross-indexed our top issues in Charity Navigator. We were making suggested go bags and stay bins for the likely floods and fires. We were wondering why men only gave us 1 star. We looked to the sky for how to help anything at all. We hit retweet on the full moon and we liked the Big Dipper. Constellations etch-a-sketch the night. Then the window shades round pull rose into a sun and light came on. We agreed with the ancients. That was hopeful. We turned location back off. We were innocent, but each other moment, we were lost. Thanks. So, something about Ron as a generous editor. He said, yeah, I'm going to take this poem. It's a weird poem, but so got to appreciate that. It's called Year One. We were a small, roving band of lactating mothers, settling into the corner of a coffee shop, unwanted upper-middle-class nomads with our trendy fold-up strollers, our enormous bags of compostable diapers, because at first we took everything a baby could need wherever we went. I'm surprised a pediatrician didn't pop out. Although one item we lacked was those lovely fabric shoulder tents they have now, so that breastfeeding required a partial view of a blossoming bosom, which more than any other single thing now made us feel part of a time before equipment. We three who had so recently been strangers in a birthing class, one from Italy, the other from Sweden, and both brassy, confident striders along Brooklyn sidewalks, now around a table, instinctually shielding each other like uncovered wagons circling a campfire. And for many months, when one baby cried, all our breasts zinged to the task. It was a time before differentiation, in so many ways, of us, the closest I will get to a tribal tent. And whatever went on at home, it was good to gather inside and speak our mother tongue. Thank you. Avon Boland. I stopped to read about your death and then went back to your book. I considered the amazing invention of it. I ran my hand along both pages when it was open to pages 56 and 57. In that poem, you're talking about silence, how it was a story and it told the story. I ran my hand along the pages as if testing linens. I considered how each page held your voice. How ingenious, how one page lies flat on the others with markings that are also silent until we read them, our mind daubing them word by word like a wand over stones. How well we trust by now the fleet winter evening will come over your neighborhood in the suburbs of Dublin, and how you will look out from your front doorway at dusk. Now your poems themselves seem framed by their rectangular thresholds, the ones you kept walking through first. It's so nice to read here with these poets who some, I know their work, and I'm happy to have these poems all be in the same room together. I'm very elevated by it.
And we're really listening.
Let's see. So this is a poem from my friend Dan Meltz, who's here tonight, who I've heard read here. It's called Office of Apology. Getting there. The Office of Apology. Sometime after coffee, around 4 p.m., I start on that day's apologies. I try not to get backlogged. No one wants to be a newlywed again with all those thank you notes to write. In bulk, sincerity flags, and in order to feel freshly, starkly abashed each day, and to keep from feeling freshly, starkly abashed each day, I remember that I've always offered apologies, hostess-like, as though ordained for it, wrongly though, in a switched-at-birth sort of way, I like to think. Be that as it may, having been mistakenly tagged a worker bee assigned to the mistake department, I unwillingly drill down on my identity with the focus of Ahab in reverse, so that my place in the cosmos might be assured and help neatly frame those more reserved and considered, the quietly poised and put together. Here's how it works. I forgot our lunch date and left Dan waiting in the restaurant until 2 bites left of his sandwich. Like a social multi-car collision, next I was late to a long-planned reunion during which I sped-talked to be home for a Zoom, which opened with me panting. That was today. It's only worth saying because I saw a clip on YouTube of Tony Bennett and Amy Winehouse recording Body and Soul at the Abbey Road studio. And those minutes could serve as a demo video of how kindness writes things, or tries to, because Bennett works so hard to soothe the saddest genius while trying to ameliorate her decade of mistakes. She was 27 and died a few months later. And Bennett said he wished he'd had more time to urge her to take better care of herself, and later mentions that Jack Rollins, who had been Lenny Bruce's manager, said Bruce's tragedy was that he, quote, sinned against his talent. And Bennett said that single phrase had changed his own life long ago, and how he wished his world tour hadn't taken him away, so he might have told her so, because he knew Amy Winehouse was a world-class talent who sang right. And for goodness sake, Prince even offered her his plane to save her from her life-sucking father and mate, a story playing out in Whitney Houston's bio likewise. And I'm not one to say I never did anything wrong, but sometimes the wrong people are left holding the regret, as if someone in circulation made a mistake, got promoted, and has yet to apologize. Thank you. So, towards the end of my mother's life, which I pictured as her nearing the edge of a large open plain, uncontained wind spun at her hair, even as I brushed it. Speaking to her was like calling with a hand cupped beside my mouth, because she was slightly estranged from language and sat wild-eyed in the swirl of any conversation. I understood this from where my own daughters stood, so buddy-buddy with the current world. Much needed explaining to the one who used to explain. Maybe aging can be measured in units of explanation, how much you have left. And I still had small bills, information about tasks of daily administration, but no longer how the hummingbird tamps spider webs to make a nest, or an octopus turns any color in the ocean. I even remember with joy my youngest, home with a fever, how we read a picture book about the endurance to cool her off. And as she recovered, how she found to her delight she could stack one large number on top of another to add up perfectly below a line she drew. That was life. And as my mother nears the rim of hers, and the wind has stripped away the thin sheaf of her living anger, her competition with happiness itself, now her bare, bowed shoulders of kindness frighten me, pain me, she who has loved me so dearly, and how to explain what adds up and endures in this life. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, everybody.
So Jessica mentioned Prince, and there's a wonderful story about Prince. And he would go to his band, and he'd say, here's what you need to do. Here's what we're going to do for the song. And they'd say, we can't do that. And he said, no, you can do that. And he said, no, we don't know how to, this is too complicated for us. And he said, no, you can do it. And they'd rehearse and rehearse and rehearse. And 3 weeks later, they'd be like, whoa, holy shit, like we got this done. Look at this. And then Prince would say, okay, now, and here are the dance steps that go with it. So that for me talks about the creative process. Just when you think you're done, you're not done. You're never done like that. So this is an amazing book. This is Laura Kolb's. Am I pronouncing it right? Colby. Oh, thank you. This is Laura Kolbe's. It's her first book. No one would ever know this is her first book. I mean, it's astonishing. It's so self-assured. It takes such pleasure in its language and its diction. And she has a background that most of us don't have in medicine, and she brings that vocabulary into here. So there are amazing poems about cadavers, but there are also wonderful poems about the art of the outsider artist Bill Traylor and stuff. So I was just knocked out by this book, and it's very exciting for me to be able to meet Laura and hear her read tonight. So please welcome Laura Kolbe.
That's such a generous introduction, Michael. I'm really so grateful, and to Ron for putting this in motion, and everybody here. I know that it's still feels unusual, still feels exotic and delightful and strange to come together, at least in my experience, and to hear poetry in a warm and close space, and to hear each other breathe, and to kind of sense the room with our full sensorium. And so this is just incredible. Some of these poems that I am going to read are actually from an unpublished book manuscript that's in process. I gave birth 2 months ago, and so I was pregnant for much of last year, and that inspired a sort of diary that became a 40-part poem sequence that's still sort of in process, but that's where the skeleton of it came from. And I was really lucky. I chose to become pregnant and kept on choosing it, and I'm thrilled to be a mother now. But at the same time, it was a very odd year to be pregnant, especially given the forces of malevolence that are imperiling people's bodies in all kinds of ways in this country right now. And I think really at any point when pregnancy happened to me, I would have also been struck by just the way in which you suddenly feel like the whole world has an opinion about your body, about your future child's body, the way in which the sort of prying collective superego sort of like starts to sort of trickle in to the interstices of your life was really annoying and really strange. And so while there was a lot I was really joyful about, there was a lot that I was kind of ambivalent about. And so some of that more bitter and terrified undercurrent kind of comes up in this manuscript here and there. And so I'll just dive in. This one's called Still, and its subtitle is 8 Weeks. Tell me about the final day, my body, full as it'll go, without yet changing size or shape, denser than it ever packed itself, the last day of body before, will still not show, when mirror still won't mark how underflesh has no reserve, no extra give or compress left, the airless torso sedimented on a pelvic leaded glass. Tell me which will be the last time I look at me while old body's custardy silt still anchors to the bark of how I am. Say a month. Say tomorrow. Say not now. Was it just now? Won't I know until it happens and adrift? Won't I look on non-self me and algebraize its changes? Is fear of future mash note to the past? Oh, shameless how I loved old me, prancing, boozing, flinging my life into crosswalks like salt into boiling water, latching to friends like a pig-led brooch. I was a mean Sybil and a sleepy drunk, rocking on the sun-up subway, while the girl beside me on the bench curled her lashes with a metal teaspoon, honest to goodness, rinsed it with a little spit, ate with it a carton of yogurt on her way to whatever work requires both those sacraments. I, covered in eyes, as hide can be when polished by the mammoth chamois of light rain on a Friday night. How I envy now those rinses of the slipshod and august. Oh, old me, your morosity at noon, your blackened silver, filthy toenails, doctrines, surmises, hand between coat buttons like a general astride a chain of sparkling islands. Have I changed yet outwardly? And is outward only dingy wrapper on the real? Or does container flavor what it clasps, alter it, the applesauce smell of wrist under watch band, like peregrine becoming nearly pet inside its hood? Tell me it's the last day of before, and I'll go a-mousing, sink my beak beneath the fur of one last clappered heart. How I feel even now, the meat swell under my skin, warm the craw. Say it's good as here, this change in body's faithless shape. Say it's good. Say still. Say when. Thank you. This next one's called Against Maternity, 12 Weeks. Back in my body, I corset myself, like a catfish jingling in her keyhole. Up would be the way out, but I plank it off with brain. I will not float higher than reason salinated me. I weary of the call to be more magic than silt itself, than the egg and coffee mud clutches starring the Terrapin Road. I hold myself still below the water. Just the same, the tide unsews me. Just the same, the ripples, handspan south of ribs, outflank me, brim without me, find channels where there was no channel, pay the drawbridge out of stolen coin. Shovel out a delta so the sea confronts, unprivately, the last of me. I turn my head away and face my desk. Sticky squares of paper, pens studded with the lyrics of medications, a red bowl thicketed with popcorn, a stricken list by laminated subject. I have cut my hair above the ears. I will not be caught fluked, unhearing. The honey of the mother will not gorge my organs of sense. I grind my chin against the forward air. I am the startling cat, bunting her face along a forest of turned and tufted salon legs. Along my lip, a shoe, a lace. I claw, I core, I char. I uncradle and discredit the stubborn fruits strewn and faking sleep in the pillowed hay paths luring to the barn. I am the stark cadet, half crazy with scouting between bridleways and tracks. Every trap could be a house in which a needle's eye is living. Every room could be that stepping stile to heaven. So say the tickling hands, pointing like asparagus in the nitrous muck. The road out of my mind is paved with sugared clavicles. The maidens and the matrons, the matrons and the maidens. Were there only ever two troops, heydayed where the horizon stalls? Dread of mine, sweat in the forelocks roofing my undainty skull. You cork the whiny gases from 100 bodies sunk and settling. Woman bodies split like poppy heads between first person and the pulvering tribute. Split along the palate, where first they tasted the sailcloth weight of their own tongues unmooring. This next one is called Late October Stonington, 29 weeks. You try to unthink it, but the geraniums really are a hotter pink. Now rain smears their faces on the black granite wall, and they allow their own destruction. You suppose health and beauty bind their green juices together, pricking upwards like a cheerful skyscraper filled with offices. But the ardor of the wasted makes its own point. The lone hips of beach roses harden in the waxy fog. So many kinds of driveways here, crushed shells, pea gravel, asphalt, or just two slugs of sand with stamped grass between. They all have tango beauty, shaded, slow, and bent. Now force of use is leached away with zinced-up residents in Italy or Florida. You call your husband from vacation town. Today he is giving up drinking. He is rounding himself like a river stone to unprecedented polish. A whole city waggles behind him, coaly-eyed, grinds its heel where the ginkgo fruits imitate the awful certain gods used to like in flames. Who said decadence was a rich man's game, when so much that edges against ruin comes in the frank, affordable pigment of sugar maples and in-network pills? You hardly know what to call the pointing and subsiding seated within you. More gesture than person, scumbling and reverberate, it seems like certain romantic paintings to undo by a million strokes the ship it is about. Fetus, baby, both too solid for this smoke machine royal, the flavor of recall, though it hasn't happened yet. Memory clapped backwards on the mind like a weightless baseball cap. You sense the tiny darkness cast by its brim on the back of your neck. Then the night in its frozen geode begs a hammer to disclose its secret, glistening spires. At this point, it would be beautiful to fall apart unpedaled, to take a jug of wine to the marina, end in one of those birdhouses for jetsam books swapped outside the sailor church. What stops you? In loose garments, moving quickly, your legs part wide enough that each pace you smell your own changing flora. Part bread, part shoe, part cumin, now iodinated, just living a month on the sound. It's not something you chose to be the blotter marking the open case. But the toe-sized golden tomatoes are broke on dry vines beside the mailboxes, bent saurian beacons, and in them your marrow's tussled fiber goes recognized. This one, I'm so grateful that Ron chose for publication in a forthcoming issue of AQR, and I'm really lucky to join that illustrious pantheon again. It's an incredible, incredible journal. So get your hands on one of those copies if you haven't yet, because they will be going fast. This one is called The Double Life. And as Michael mentioned, I'm a doctor and a poet, and so it's a little bit about the pendular swing between those two very dichotomous parts of my existence. The double life. They were like the canvas and the paint of a grand portrait, the two necessities. The one, the day work in the hospital, stretched its linened fingers with geometric grace. Eyeless, it felt the nubs and crevices of sick wards, tensed them on a frame until they smoothed in readiness for oil. The other, the burden of poems, coursed in many colors, the brown and pink smokes of a face. It slaked the chapped canvas, which kept stretching, surviving, and carboned by its dim roots in plant life, its origin as part of nature, which wounds and heals and is heaping with victorious white scar that end to end would encircle every planet. More poems came, knife-thick, decked upon the work. For a while, the brushstrokes lapped placable in their pigments, slept almost against the linen sternum, made the unisoned life. The doctor spun pneumonias out of the body, poured elixirs, measured the liver in centimeters, belayed the pressure of the blood. The poet drank the blood. The dark paint lodged in the canvas's pale fibers. Hung the coupled gravity, the rowing brushwork, the bleached waddle of a canvas like a tide rim, like all ornaments, finally unendured. The paint split, wrong-sized in its varnished coat. Like a cigarette, just where it was brightest, it ashed off. It had to. Flaking, it was most itself, isolations of apricot, gamboge, topaz, scarlet, no longer part of any picture. Fugitive, it entered the room warm with bodies, the floor, the rug. Entered as dust the body's blood. Its leaden chaff stirred madness, wove itself in bone. High on the wall, denuded chinks of canvas glistened, newly undisguised in milky penance. The war of work, the taut battalion going onwards with its retinue, with its sick. Is this to be regretted, the unlastingness? Tell me, how else can union end between color and its harbor, between color and its canvas bondage? Aren't we tired of our pictures? The surface always peeling from its own radiance. And the canvas suffers too, suffers where its pallor has been dyed. Unfaced again, the canvas whitens into splendor. Bright flakes of poems litter the floor. Unflocked, they unhoard their unreality. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Jess. I don't know why I'm putting these on. We doing okay? Okay. Whatever I say about Mihaela Maskaluk is going to be suspect since we've been together for a very long time. But I want to say that she constantly astonishes me with her work. And you have her bio in front of you. She was raised in Romania. So what's, I don't know, doubly or triply astonishing to me is that each of her 3 books of poems has been written in a second language. And they're remarkable books. So please welcome Mihaela Maskaluk.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's so beautiful to see so many friends and former colleagues and students who came from all over the place and amazing musicians. Thank you to all the other readers. And Ron, thank you so much, and Michael for putting this together. I'm going to start with a poem by Russ Gay. A small, needful fact. A small, needful fact is that Eric Gardner worked for some time for the Parks and Rec Horticultural Department, which means perhaps that with his very large hands, perhaps in all likelihood, he gently put into the earth some plants which, most likely, some of them, in all likelihood, continue to do what plants do. Continue to house and feed small and necessary creatures, like be pleasant to touch and smell, like convert sunlight into food, like make it easier for us to breathe. And thank you. I'm gonna read the first the three poems that are coming out in Alaska Quarterly Review. Thank you so much, Ron. And a couple of them take their title from the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows by Koenig. And so this one is called Rask. And Rask comes from rue, to regret, and burrask, a tempest. In a cave on a farmer's ancestral grounds, we scrambled toward its darkest pit, soles slipping on wet rocks, hands fumbling for walls coated thick in, we later learned, guano. And when we flooded the ceiling with light, we gasped. Clustered by the dozen to share body heat, they hung like chandeliers. We prodded with flashlight beams, swirled our wrists to mimic their swooping. Bodies began to fall, one then another, too small for a thud, naked and milky and still blind. And we watched, not knowing that when roused from torpor, they lose energy worth weeks of sustenance, or how to stop it. And another poem about bats, and this is set in the Cosmic Cave in Arkansas, just outside Eureka Springs. Cosmic. I was less taken with a cave lake being bottomless than with the stalactites becoming stalagmites in its mirror, and all of us bent over the rail, staring at our death masks. Maybe I'd descended into one cave too many. It's not that I don't tremble or have had enough of the holy, but splendor and reverence have come to quicken my pulse with shame. Then there was the slit, traveling the cavernous roof for miles, hedged with straw stalactites that grow 1 inch per 100 years. Their sexticennial presence, proof we were safe. She won't jilt us, joked the guide. Young and beautiful Rachel, like you, I was seething at how prisoners forced to build the cement platform on which we stood were mentioned, how prisoners forced to build the cement platform on which we stood were mentioned as a fun fact. Were the 30 still on death row among them? Have those freed brought their kids to the cosmic cave to see the platform and from it heard, as we did, how rainbow trout were released into this lake home to blind fish, how the latter were killed not knowing by whom or why, how it did not work out well for the new occupants either, without flow, trapped in stasis, their eggs rotted. On promising myself to buy only previously owned clothes. And this makes a reference to the story of the Wongs, a Chinese-American family who lived at 103 Orchard Street in the 1970s. And I learned about their story from the Tenement Museum, and what else? Mrs. Wong worked for a very long time in the garment factories. Give me precision, if only for the most finite of tasks, the shallowest of missions, to wear each thrift store, each flea market garment like second skin, until I hear the breath above each stitch, what accelerated the heart at the spindle, what clouded the lung, what caught in the whirring machine, who sang. Did your fingers too callous with needlework until they lost their whirls like Mrs. Wong's? When time came to naturalize, her fingers had no prints to prove who she was. Silver cotton, hemp, tencel, flax, petroleum, army of polymers, feed my greed, the ghost of each thread, soft and arsenic. Thank you. And two new poems too, and they're both called deep cut from the musical term, that song that kind of falls under the radar on a good album, on some album. So I grew up in Romania and I moved to the United States when I was 24. This poem is set in Romania in 1984. Deep cut 1. He collected wings, which meant most were yet to be severed from the body, and I watched him razor off the onion thins of red admirals and lime-speck pugs, 9-spotted moth and raspberry clearwings, the June bug's shellac. The damselflies, already dead, required a breath-holding kind of delicacy. One time, I gifted him the fins of river trout. He held them briefly, stumped, then flung them far away. Within a year, he acquired precision, went bigger, sparrows and swifts disabled by cats or windows. In the narrow alley between our communist flats, my eyes scissored and sawed along, made intimate the music of his wrist. He acknowledged my apprenticeship only once, when I brought a barn bat, freshly dead. He touched its nose, then smiled at me, and that was the last I saw of him. Maybe he sensed I'd claimed the wingless body back for burial. We were both 12, born seconds apart. Our laboring mothers hardened each other across hospital beds, and our mouth traded breasts to harvest the last sip of colostrum. I've been afraid to look into his whereabouts, but imagine in time he came to dismember without delight, operate without a margin of error, gather enough wings for his flight. Thank you. Deep Cut, Romania, 2022. And as you might know, the racism and the anti-sentiment and discrimination against Roma, popularly known and Gypsies, is still very much on the rise, unfortunately, in Eastern Europe and especially Romania. When you return a year later, the hillside is denuded. The last of its timber, stacked by the roadside, will become by winter a politician's second summer home, this one raised for the mistress who threatens blackmail. For now, it waits for the passerby, preferably Roma, who'll subtract a log or two to keep his family warm. The village cop is on the lookout. He doesn't want a second home. He wants to send his son to school in Germany. He wants stamps on papers. He wants hard cash. The man who won't get to burn the log in his fireplace will be made to feel lucky he got away with just a fine, a misdemeanor, his face splayed in the local paper. So the town rests assured the perpetrator has been punished. It believes what it wants, that the man with the hand axe logged away the forest, left the hillside barren, forced the wolves into town. He is, therefore, also responsible for the bear trampling through the supermarket. And isn't it ironic, the reporter adds, given the historical evidence, the man being of the kind who once trained the beast to dance? The timber's on its way now, and logic is irrelevant. Your anger, too, irrelevant. You abandoned. You've been writing poems. You are breathing a different air. You don't get to choose what you return here for. And I'll end with my return to Romania when I die. And some of you know I'm a chocoholic and I make my own chocolate. And this poem is called Everless, Ever plus Nevertheless, also from the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. I will die one day in this land, and you will fly back a single bar of me, packed in dry ice. The airport dogs will sniff the carousel for traces of live matter, and the cacao nutty smell will send them whimpering. Make sure I'm conched right, neither too gritty nor too emulsified, tempered properly so I'm not laced in sugar bloom. The departed will attend to the rest. For 7 years, on days of the dead, birthdays, anniversaries, drive your family to any cemetery gate to hand out dark assortments the children begged the night before. Keep the tradition, even if no one is ever waiting. If I'm lucky, they will say, Grandma overdosed on nibs. Say she got what she wanted, death by chocolate. They'll make myth of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mihaela. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Jess. I wish you could know Carrie Salerno as we know her. We only see her. We live near, I don't know, an hour or so apart, but we only see her every 6 or 8 months, it seems. But the last time we saw her, before tonight, she mentioned casually that she was going to do a solo trek in Namibia, and so tonight we see her for the first time, and we say, "Oh, you just got back from AWP," and she's like, "Yeah, but I went out 3 days early so I could go snowboarding." It's like, who are you? And her first book is such an amazing book, Shelter. And you see the information in front of you. But her second book, you wouldn't know it was written by the same person. And it seems like between books, she embraced and sort of took into herself so authoritatively, so fully, a whole new aesthetic. And wrote an amazing book out of that. And I imagine that's some of the poems you're going to read this evening then. And so she's special. Please welcome Carrie Salerno.
So thank you so much, Michael, for that beautiful introduction and just for being an amazing mentor and friend over the years. I can't imagine knowing many poets better than you, better people than you. So it's truly an honor and a pleasure. Anytime I get to spend any time in a room with you. And I'm just so grateful to be here tonight in this room of poems and to read with fellow poets Laura and Jessica and Mihaela, all who are incredibly talented. It's really something special. And I'm grateful to Ron for bringing us, and to Michael for bringing us together, and for his amazing support of our work. I think especially for me, and I'll read one of the poems that Alaska Quarterly published. But it was, I think when you get a poem taken in a journal and you're working on a manuscript and you're thinking about the way your work is coming together, the validation that you get from these editors in the journals is something that really energizes and grounds you in your work and in your vision, and helps you to keep moving in the process and trust your voice. And so I just want to say thank you for that, because because it is a real service, I think, to we writers. And it's quite amazing and generous. So I'm going to read. My newly bifocal self is going to try and see and read. I'll read a few poems from my newest book, Tributary, and then I thought maybe I would sound out a very brand new poem at the end if people feel like that's a good idea, maybe. Okay, all right, let's do it. We'll try it. We'll see how that goes. And I think in terms of this book, Tributary, it is really very different for me. I played a lot with form and space. And, I think it's the book is a lot in conversation with patriarchy and fundamental Christianity, two entities that I had great dealings with in my upbringing, and it also, these poems sort of grew out of trying to create conversation, I think, between my father and my brother, who was ostracized from our family because he converted to Islam. So I want to begin with a poem. It's called His Name Everywhere. And in the book, his name is redacted, but I'll read it. His name everywhere. These rooms I'm in, 5 at once. My voice in the aluminum ductwork. Ryan, Ryan, Ryan. This is my father's house, ours, but we don't say Ryan, Ryan, Ryan to the brother who's gone missing. And in his absence is the sound of his name everywhere. I open the window to let him out, my voice a surge that carries through the halls of refusing the brother. I practice for his absence. I practice for erasure. Ryan, Ryan, Ryan. His name courses through the house on the molecular dust, sinking in waves to the hardwood. I open the window and try to breathe. Let his name out. Let me out. No more of the secret. This river deafening us. So these poems kind of move through and in and have conversations through the entity of a river. So the river kind of, as its name tributaries, it's called tributary. It's the river appears frequently. Sometimes a speaker, sometimes a guest. Okay. Here's the list. All right. Some dark organ willing. Pardon me. When you strapped a fresh steer to the branch, which was the bar of their swing set, the girls swung anyway, arched thighs around to tap toes on the other side of its body. Between them, a long gash in the hairy form left ajar for bloodletting, for words, and for twilight. How many times did I ascend your porch stair and let my finger do the work of pushing a button bell? My body before you, not quite what you'd expected, but what you'd accepted already as one you wouldn't love. Perhaps somewhere within you I'm also hanging, my feet neatly folded beneath the mealy rope. Perhaps one comes undone and I dangle there in my candura, a mess you mind but cannot accept the reading of. Perhaps as the red deer whose hooves once grazed these indigenous grasses that shimmy in the crisp zephyrs billowing over the green plain which croons like insects against it, as the deer sways from its bundled legs, whose body grew longer over its days with your daughters, pumping legs in perfect communion, peering for a heart or a liver or some dark organ willing to be an offering. I am the bright wound, open and festering, a voice beckoning you to the renderer, a voice undressing down to itself, stumbling naked of this tree, this fence, this greed-grown yard. Thank you all so much for being here. I know I said that already, but I just feel like saying it again. I would like to read. Michael might be sick of it, but I'm gonna read it anyway. But there's a poem in here actually that's dedicated to Michael, and it's after or influenced by a poem of his called "Horse," which is one of my favorite poems of his, of the many of my favorite poems of his, and it's called "Baptism with a Pond in It." There are two different baptism poems in it, but this is the other one. Baptism with a pond in it. I saw my sister resurrect, wet and shining, and applauded and spun to sprint up the hill from the pond. But the water, sweet, dumb, and warm still, and the preacher's thumb and finger clamped, pushed my body into what was made to bring me closer to. Body of water apportioning, where the only water roaring was quick to suffocate my face. I closed my eyes and searched for the river, and there only could place my father, drunk, unspooling me like a carpet into the water, his arm a firm cane, forcing the body in. But how I wanted to stay below, void of sound and drum-swole cello, void of white bright, the body's buoyant bellow, an effervescing halo, an ocean swelling the capillary and marrow. What was the sin? For what to atone as a child in drenched Sunday robes who wept? The hope of transformation, and not for any joy nor salvation, dear Father. What arrives suddenly in a dirty moat, a preacher's sodden bay? Even the fish won't take up residence. Let us pray. What's left in the water will not wash away. Thank you, thank you. All right. I want to read Sick Horse, which also has a companion poem, Given Horse, but this is the one that Ron took, one of the ones for the journal. Sick Horse. I feel like I just have to have my legs under me when I read this poem. It's like serious, like from the belly. Okay. Sick Horse. Girls, you can bring that horse to water. Sick horse, desert mouth horse, horse painted to slick sedimentary rock. Bring that horse to water. You can, girl. Horse bit grinding, horse you really gotta drag. Red stencil, skinny ass horse. That horse to water, bring him. Girls, when it lie down there, belly on the bank, don't forget to praise, to stroke the hoary mane, and coo at him, sweetly bray his name. Don't forget to praise who made this horse, and made for you the walk, and made for you the bridle, and made for you the cracked earth in want of water, and made for you this river, and made for you this labor. Yank on that bridle, bitches, yank it. Yank that horse and force its head down. Prove you cannot make the man drink. All right. Let's do the new one. It's a little long. It's like a little long and I'm a little scared of it, but I'm going to try it. It has notes on it. So you always know it's a work in progress that way, right? All right, and the end is I'm still thinking about it. So anyway, we'll try it. Okay, so it's a ode to Darnell, ode to the crocus, my favorite flower. To the early morning charge nurse, Darnell, who escorted me into the operating theater, where in my cornflower blue gown and goose-pimpled skin, beneath a bleach-slubbed cotton robe, I was laid pugnaciously sobbing beneath the ignited rotund surgical beams that blared through to my core where they would cut into and discover, I swear, the air laden with the way the scalpel approaches, flashing. You are the bright stamen of a crocus on that late March morning on a Sunday while I walk my sister-in-law's dog with her and discuss our marriages. A thing I did not consider once before undergoing the knife, except that the knife and going under might result in my death or in the discovery that I might later die. And I have no will said the doctor. He thought it could be true, and after a week of trying to process his words, disbelieving them even, I finally was able to ricochet cancer against my spouse and absorb the return of its flail. It was just a few hours before we were to leave for the city, and our son had mercifully, finally, fallen asleep. And we held hands limply. And he said, "We don't fuck with cancer." And I conceded his point. They could just take whatever was the woman from me. But I insist this poem is about my love for crocus and darnel, and the way the flower insists upon spring, the way he clutched my reluctant arm, as if come hell or high water, I would break through the rhyme ice, the word for which is more precise in less empirical languages, the no matter the weather, rushing the earth into and out of a season. It's the no matter whatness about the flower that I've always loved, and that I felt in his embrace. And if you ask me what my favorite flower is, I might say a blue rose, because of the love I have for the first thing my spouse ever gave me. And what it means so many years later, the petals unworldly and ethereal and spellbindingly impossible. But I've never seen one rise in the wild, as does the crocus that makes my cheeks flush with its ivory velvet in delicate contrast with the blackened slush kicked across it. The cardamom stamen brilliant against our strict winter sun, how it carries the deep glow of daylight within its cup, unfurling to clutch the sun's imperceptible emissions and guide them into the depth of its roots, and the impossibility of its presence each spring, the impossibility of chlorophyll when I encounter the brilliant blossoms fully flowered in their stocky clump. Crocus, you are tender and blooming, like the sickened ovary the oncologist plucked and bagged from my abdomen while I dreamed I was still sobbing on the matchstick thin steel table, while the other was freed from a sticky web of adhesions spun by endometriosis's relentless, gangly nest that's ruled my body since its first menstruation. You are the uterus clipped from its stem, leaving behind the network of root what led to. Flowering in the vase or sliced lengthwise and flash frozen, your section beneath the microscope of a pathologist scanned for wilt and waste, a cluster of majesty brimming from the ground, and I tell whoever I am with, even if it's just myself, of my love for crocuses. And then days after, crocuses, and days and days and days, and then the year after in anticipation, their arrival and the scans, and then another spring and another. The luscious purple, not even anything like that of my insides, as if I could know, but saintly and smooth and crisp and purposeful, silk on my fingertips, the sturdiness of them, the charm, darnel, how I loved you for simply squeezing my hand. I will never forget it. For how you nearly carried my drugged body down the hospital corridor, which seemed like the longest and the shortest walk. The impossibility of the crocus, the impossibility of cancer, the impossibility of your kindness. The arrival sudden and clear, like danger, and also maybe something like conditionless love. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Mihaela. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Ron, for getting us all of us together tonight. Appreciate that. And it's been a great pleasure so far. You doing okay? Yeah. All right. I think I'm going to read 6 or 7 poems, none long. But since Carrie ended with a poem in progress, sort of sounded finished. Yeah. And for me, part of the process of revision is reading poems aloud then over the next month. So here's a poem, and it's a poem for St. Paddy's Day, I guess. It's called The Poisoning. Lesions blot your body, shallow red concavities like post holes mapping skin. Nerves wired to your spine detonate without warning. You'd pried panels off walls of the forsaken family pub, hauled out debris, wanting to return to your ancestral village, some vestige of community, and drew into your lungs the loosened arsenic dust as Ireland greened around you. Amateur carpenter daughter, spackling drywall, cutting trim, black wheelbarrow brimming with tainted slats of pine. You must have sensed the barbed particles of the past in your throat, the tumultuous chronicle of the country residing within you. Flying home, you recalled visiting the cliffs of Moria, a small child gazing west as you clung to your father's neck, wind slashing rock, the stony facade resisting the sea. The toxins will weaken with time, the blisters fade from your face. Now you're a citizen of history. And this is also new. You must have had, as I had awful jobs early on when I was, going through grad school and stuff. And so this comes out of that time. Scrambled. I dreaded the rush after Mass each Sunday as I dumped the dozens, feathers and shit still stuck to shells, into a metal vat, then tripped the mixer before straining the mess and splashing the glop on the griddle. I cleaned the coffee machine the size of a droid, while sweat rilled beneath my paper hat to wet the net bridling my beard. My bile shames me now. Someone else works those early morning shifts. Someone still wearing her pancake shack smock while waiting in line at the post office for money orders to pay overdue bills, who paper-clipped exact amounts of dollars but lost track counting coins, so asks me, shifting behind her, for 15 cents to make up the difference for one last stamp, passes the change to the patient clerk, then licks the likeness of Gwendolyn Brooks, who would have hugged this woman hard and split with her a single egg for breakfast. Do you remember those Gwendolyn Brooks stamps? It's been a pleasure to sit here. Most of you are looking this way, so I'm sitting there, and it's great to see folks come up and open the door and look in and think, oh shit, poetry, and head on out. They don't know what they're missing. This is called Brooklyn Walk-Up. Too often my mother told the story of bundling me into the red snowsuit, leaving me scarved and ear-flapped, zippered to the chin, baby-bootied upon the quilted bed, while she wrestled the carriage 6 flights down tenement steps, only to return to a locked door, the key nestled in the handbag dangling from the inside hook. A cry like no other arose inside her. She rushed down crooked stairs out onto Covert Street, past the deli and funeral parlor, all the way around the corner to the Irving Avenue alley, where she grasped, then climbed, this new mother, the fire escape ladder rung by icy rung to reach the first metal landing, then clanged upward floor by floor until, crouched upon the uppermost grate, she could see the swollen, immobile, a doll-shaped pile. She raised the unclasped window, gathered me, grabbed her bag, descended once more the 6 floors to the cold carriage, then raced to the DeKalb Avenue BMT to meet my father home from work. Wheeled madly, I slept like a bobbing cork. She never told him how she'd shut me in, how she'd gaze through glass at the clump of cloth, the breathing heap of wool and cotton for which she'd leapt beyond her measure. Motherhood had turned uncommon. Years later, she took such pleasure in repeating the story. That boy swathed like an Andean child sacrificed on the mountain peak, mummified by the dry glacial winds, never to name his executioner, that boy her favorite version of me. Thank you. You're welcome. You could save it all for one big applause at the end if you want. My father's comb. When my mother insisted that I take something, his 5-inch aluminum lifetime already outlined my back pocket. The comb I'd watched him ply how many thousand mornings to rake his hair straight back while I waited my turn before the bathroom mirror. I wielded a 39-cent Ace Hard rubber with a dab of Brill cream to slick my mop before school, but for years now I've run his comb, as he did, under the cold water tap, then dragged across my scalp only the shorter tines of the guillotine-shaped tool of vanity and work ethic. Please take something, she'd said. My father 3 days dead, but I'd already nabbed the one object I knew I'd touch each day in such casual ritual to comb the grief away. Here's a poem that Ron was kind enough to publish in AQR. Do you know this? Some of you? It looks like something for an abortion, I know, right now with all that on our mind. But it was patented by Tomima Edmark in 1991 when my daughter was 3 years old, and it's called a topsy tail. Any of you use this? So, yeah, so, well, I'm going to explain in the poem. And I wrote this poem for my daughter on her 33rd birthday. Topsy tail. Winter mornings, not fully risen, still hunched on the mattress's seamed edge. I am there again, slumped on a distant bed, woozy, dream deep, in flannel pajamas as you shuffle barefoot from your room, asleep flushed in a Rugrat's nightgown. With the brush you've brought me, I stroke your hair, its lush tangle, static electricity leaping off each bristle, off fingers smoothing a wayward curl, a mini pageantry to ignite the day. I coax light from this celestial circuitry, the bedroom beginning to brighten until hair flows along your spine, then slip a band into that sparkling cascade, open sesame, open the hair above, and with the cheap pink plastic dime store tool, loop your ponytail through that portal into this French style, sweeping your neck. I could almost weep at how little it takes to make you content. You race to the television full of cartoons this Saturday morning 30 years ago. I miss that light, that living Rothko radiance, though no such brilliance must still exist, must crackle when someone else who loves you gathers your hair in their gentle hands. If you've been counting, I think that's 5. This is prayer with Caravaggio. I will no longer enter a cathedral unless it conceals a single Caravaggio in a recess reeking of incense, where one bulb illuminates the oils that they may shine more darkly, that I might recognize the human flaws in divine depictions and weep with wonder. I'd rather stroll the local mall, the Galleria in Milan, where women burdened with bags stop to scratch with one foot the bull's huge balls for luck. That mosaic on the tiled floor snorts near sliding open doors, where summer's dense, ungodly heat hammers the falsely frigid air, while prayers exhaled for centuries from nearby pews and candled naves diminish in the vaulting. Here is my prayer, murmured over ice, shaved into a paper cup, euroed from a vendor at the bottom of these cathedral steps where I sprawl, a syrup sweetening my tongue. I will no longer enter a cathedral, but wherever I go, I'll still pray with the sinful devotion of Caravaggio, who paid his prostitute, robed in blue, to pose for a tableau as the poxed yet holy Virgin Mary. And this will be the last poem. So when I met Mihaila about 27 years ago, and was courting her, was wooing her, I would invite her over to the house, and I'd make these wonderful meals for her. And then when she moved in finally, and she wanted to keep eating these meals, she pulled out those recipes and realized that they had been handwritten by my previous girlfriend. This is true. But the food was good, so we still wanted to eat that food, so she started taking over and making these meals, but she would always change something. She would never follow those quite directions. She always changed something. And she also changed the name of the dinner, of the meal then. And so I mentioned the name of this particular one toward the end of the poem, but it's titled now what she had titled it. It's called Good Riddance Chicken. My wife still cooks some meals using my ex-girlfriend's recipes, their familiar cursive once thrilling in those years of exchanging letters with their catalogs of arousal, divulging where we would taste each other on those weekends we managed to erase the distance between her home and mine. Maryland, Connecticut, I-95, driving through downpour or snow, blasting cranberries or counting crows. She prepared exquisite meals, artichoke heart souffle or base fillets poached with fennel for my midnight arrival, coddled eggs with shallots for breakfast, then mailed the recipes so that I might, in her absence, recreate each savory morsel. Now my wife revises each directive, shunning grapes but adding orange wheels, or switching shiitake for wild chanterelle, purring with Rihanna on the radio, crossing out the name of each dish at the top of the creased index card to substitute one of her own invention, but growing quiet when she reads again, looped at the bottom of her favorite recipe, the one for chilled Roquefort chicken. Quote, always better when you add my company. Thank you so much. Ron, thank you for setting this up. Pick up some copies of the terrific journal that we have that Ron brought for you. Mihaly and I came all the way over from Asbury Park, New Jersey. Ron came from Alaska. So, thank you.